Well, our text for today, for our sermon, is Luke chapter 14, verses 1 through 14. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts of the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" And they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him on his way. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" And they had nothing to say. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. "When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host, who invited both of you, will come and say to you, 'Give this person your seat.' Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, 'Friend, move up to a better place.' Then you will be honored in the presence of the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." Then Jesus said to his host, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." This is the word of our Lord. If you bow your heads and pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for bringing us here together safely. We lift up, while we have a little bit of rain going on here, we lift up those who are facing the hurricane and pray for their safety. But we ask that you would be with us here today, that you would open our hearts and our minds to receive your word, that you would speak to us, and that we would be changed by it. And we pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. So how many of you are going out to dinner after the service today? Anyone? You're going out? But not to dinner. Okay, you're just going out for a good time. All right, you know, one of the things, when I was in college, I went to college in South Georgia at Georgia Southern University in a small Georgia town, and most people went to church in this little small town. And they would go to church on Sunday morning, and afterwards they would either go home for a family dinner or they would go out to eat. And that was just kind of the tradition. They would have family over or they would go out to eat. And it was such a big deal that it became kind of a friendly competition between the churches of who was going to get out earliest so that the people could get to the restaurants before the other people. And you would even see people sitting there in the pews. They'd be listening, and the pastor would be going on, and they'd be like, "Pastor better hurry up, or the Methodists are going to beat us this week." You know, it was a kind of a thing. It was all in good fun, but everyone wanted to get to where they were going afterwards. Well, we have kind of the same kind of tradition that was happening in Jesus' day. People would go to the synagogue on the Sabbath, and then afterwards they would come home and they would have a luncheon or a dinner after being at the synagogue. And for most of the people, they would just go home and they would do this with their family. But for some, especially if you were kind of the elite in the society, you would throw these feasts. And you would invite people to these feasts. And it was kind of a big to-do. And so you had all these people that were invited there, but they were also semi-public, so some people were able to just kind of stop by, but they kind of stayed on the outskirts. And they would kind of watch and observe what was going on. I guess this was their version of kind of keeping up with the Kardashians or something. What are the Pharisees doing today? They didn't have TV back then. So Jesus is invited to one of these feasts, one of these luncheons. And he goes after the synagogue. He's invited by one of the head Pharisees. And he goes to this place. But they didn't invite him because they thought, "Oh, we love Jesus. We should have him at our dinner." They didn't even invite him because they thought, maybe we need to get to know this guy and we need to hear what he has to say. Rather, it says they were watching him carefully. And implication of the text is that they were kind of watching him like a hawk to see if he would mess up in some way that they could point out and say, look at what he's doing. You shouldn't listen to this guy. You shouldn't follow this Jesus guy because he's a sinner. And then we have this scene that happens where Jesus walks in and there's a man who's got what they call dropsy back in the day. It's an abnormal swelling. It's caused by a buildup of fluid in the body. We now know that it's caused by kidney issues or congestive heart failure. But they didn't know that, and the belief was that it was caused by either sin or uncleanliness. Right? And so either of those things would not get you invited to a Pharisee dinner. But here's this man at this dinner. Now it's possible that he just showed up, but someone who's sick like this probably isn't dragging themselves out of bed to just see what the Pharisees are doing. So it's more likely that the Pharisees actually brought this guy for the specific reason of trying to set Jesus up. Jesus had healed people on the Sabbath before, and they wanted to have a gotcha moment showing, look at this guy, he's working on the Sabbath. He's doing something he's not supposed to do. You shouldn't listen to him. Rather, listen to us. We're the ones who follow the law. We're the good ones here. We're the great ones. They were kind of trying to elevate themselves above Jesus. So Jesus walks in, and he's not a fool. He knows what's going on, but he's not going to let it stop him. So he puts them in a situation that they really can't get out of. He asks them, all right, so you're the experts in the law. Is it okay for me to heal him? Is that within the law? And they realize, well, if we say no, then we look like we don't care about people who are sick. We look like we're uncompassionate. So that's not good. But if we say yes, then he's free to do it, and we've lost our trap, and then we can't accuse him. We can't have our gotcha moment. So they just sit there quiet, and they refuse to answer. And so Jesus goes ahead and heals them. But then he uses this, and he sends them away, because it doesn't need to be their spectacle, right? So then he uses this as a teaching moment. And he says, look, if your child fell into a well, or even an ox, and it was the Sabbath, would you just leave it there, or would you put it out? You would show compassion on this person, or even this animal that had need. Why wouldn't I do that to this person? And they have nothing. They have no response to this. But then Jesus is looking around, and he sees something else kind of odd going on. Everybody is trying to get into the seats of honor. Right? And so I watched a video, this was a few months ago. This is just kind of one of those random YouTube suggestions. But it was this video on the psychology of a meeting room. And this person analyzed where different seats are in the meeting room and what they mean. And so you had the person at the head of the table would be the person who's in charge, you kind of figure out. The person leading the meeting. But then the person to their right and their left, they were kind of second in charge. They were the most important seats. We've heard the phrase right-hand man, right? That person can kind of lean over and whisper, and you can have little discussions. So you must be important. And then the further down the table you went, you were less and less important. Right? And this is kind of the thing that we see here. These people are trying to get into these seats of honor. They've been invited to one of the big wig Pharisee houses, and they're trying to look like the important person to the Pharisee. So they look important. It's all about making themselves look big and look important. And so the text that's used here, the words that are used here, kind of have this present tense that this is happening. Jesus looks around and he sees them jostling for position. And these aren't seats like we are used to. This isn't a table that sits yay high and you pull your seat up. Right? These are low tables. Back in the day, you've heard the phrase that they reclined at table. What they would literally do is they would lay down on a pillow with their feet extended out behind them. And that's how they would eat. They would lay down. So people are literally falling over themselves, trying to get into these places of honor so that they'll look good. And Jesus says, no, you need to be humble. And he tells them this text that we heard with the first children's message, right? If somebody invites you to a feast, don't put yourself in the place of honor. Because then the host may come to you and say, I've got someone else that needs this seat, and then you're humiliated and sent to the least important seat. Rather, you should sit in the least important seat so that the host can come to you and say, friend, come up here. You shouldn't be sitting in the least important seat. Then you're up. And what Jesus is conveying is that we should humble ourselves in the way that we interact with each other and let God exalt. He even says, those who humble themselves will be exalted. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled. And Jesus even then takes it to the next level with the host. And he says, look who you're inviting. Rather than inviting all of your friends and the rich people and all these people that will make it look like, look how important you are because of the party you're having. Invite the poor. Invite the sick and the crippled. Invite the people who are in need. They can't pay you back, but you'll be rewarded for it. Right? Help the people that are in need of help. And it's kind of ironic because what did they do at the beginning of this? Right? They brought this sick person, but they didn't bring him, the person with dropsy, because they had compassion on him, because they wanted to lift him up, because they wanted to help him. They brought him to have a gotcha moment with Jesus. Jesus is saying, no, these are the people that you should invite anyways. The people who need your help. Because what they would do is they would invite the important people so they would look big, and also so then those people would have to invite them to their feasts on another week. And again, they would look important. It was all about their image. And Jesus says, don't worry about your image. Help the people who need to be helped. Lift them up. And let God lift you up. Don't be so concerned with your own image. He calls us to a life of humility, to putting the needs of others as a forefront in our lives. But he doesn't just call us to this. He lived it. He showed it to us. He humbled himself. This is the God of the universe. And he became human. The Creator became the created for us. He suffered all the indignities of being a human. And we have to eat and bathe. And he was born as a baby that couldn't do anything for itself. He humbled himself. And then when he came, he didn't set up some throne and say, everybody serve me. I'm the Son of God, serve me. Rather, he came to serve rather than to be served. And he went around teaching and healing and feeding and caring for people, forgiving sins. And ultimately, he offers himself as a ransom for us. Those who were in need have been invited to his table. Except he doesn't bring us and leave us in need. He heals us. He cleanses us. He makes us worthy to be there by clothing us with his righteousness. Not because of anything that we've done to earn it, but because of his love and his mercy. He humbled himself to bring our salvation. And he says, love each other like that. Live humbly. Love each other. Put the needs of each other at the forefront of your lives, rather than trying to exalt yourselves. Jesus humbled himself, and then he was exalted. He now sits at the right hand of God the Father Almighty, the most honored position in the universe. And he says, humble yourselves and I will exalt you. Don't worry about exalting yourself. Let me take care of you. Love others as I have loved them.